Severed head found in the mountain.
All the blood was pumped from their bodies, indicating that they may have been butchered while they were still alive.
He cut off her head and then he inserted his penis into her mouth.
It's got to be this crazy mother that he had who locked him in the cellar, but she must have felt something.
A real bad problem, depriving people of their lives.
He was extremely affable, cooperative, and articulate and intelligent.
Kemper was very smart. He knew what psychiatrists and psychologists wanted to hear.
Ini bukanlah berita biasa, namun benar-benar kisah nyata. Seorang pemuda dengan tingkat kecerdasan di atas rata-rata dan dikenal sebagai raksasa yang lembut dan menyenangkan, yang suka bergaul dengan para petugas polisi. Namun ternyata ia adalah pelaku kejahatan yang paling keji yang pernah ada, yang tidak seorang pun membayangkannya, yang akan kita kupas lebih dalam lagi dalam tayangan dokumenter khas K-Channel. Selengkapnya sesaat lagi hanya di YouTube K-Channel, membuka jendela dunia. Ia adalah seorang pemuda yang tidak percaya diri untuk mendekati gadis-gadis yang disukainya. Karena kondisi fisiknya yang bertubuh sangat tinggi dan besar, yang tidak biasanya. Namun ia sangat disukai para petugas polisi yang sering bergaul dengannya. Mereka menyebutnya sebagai raksasa yang lembut dan menyenangkan. Tetapi di balik kelembutannya, ia menyimpan sisi gelap yang sungguh mengerikan. Sebuah fantasi yang menjadi kejahatan paling keji yang pernah ada, yang akan menjadi berita menggemparkan dan mengejutkan para petugas polisi.
I'm Abe from Washington, USA. You are watching K-Channel, the best documentary channel in Indonesia. Stay tuned.
Santa Cruz adalah kota yang indah di tepi laut di California, Amerika Serikat. Kota yang dituju oleh para turis untuk berselancar. Kemudian pada tahun 1965, universitas-universitas muncul seiring dengan munculnya kaum hippies. Sehingga ada perasaan hidup yang sangat bebas dan mudah di daerah ini, yang menarik bagi kalangan anak muda, termasuk para wanita-wanita muda. Sehingga kota ini banyak didatangi oleh orang-orang dari seluruh penjuru negeri untuk menjalani gaya hidup yang bebas. Namun pada tahun 1972, suasana damai di Santa Cruz menjadi hancur ketika mulai munculnya penemuan mayat di tepi pantai.
All of a sudden, there were bodies being washed in on the ocean. There were grisly discoveries. And the thought was from a lot of people in town, what the hell is happening to our little paradise?
Pada siang hari ini, dua pendaki yang sedang berjalan-jalan dengan anjing mereka di daerah Gunung Loma Prieta yang berada jauh di atas pegunungan Santa Cruz, di titik tertinggi di wilayah tersebut, mereka menemukan tengkorak. Sehingga ada panggilan masuk ke kantor sheriff dari dua pendaki tersebut. Lantas mereka segera berkendara ke puncak gunung ini untuk mencari, menggali dan melihat apakah ada area lain yang tampak mencurigakan.
Severed head found in the mountain. It was just a skull. We had no body.
Do you have any idea how large the area to be searched is?
We got roughly about a square mile at minimum.
We were trying to search for anything that doesn't belong in the dirt, but we find no other body parts. We brought the skull back to the sheriff's office and tried to identify the remains. we found out the skull belongs to a woman, a young woman, a teenager to early 20s.
Dan satu persatu, para wanita muda di kota ini mulai menghilang.
We were dealing with a lot of missing person reports.
It became clear that somebody was killing young co-ed hitchhikers.
Anita Lucchesa, seorang mahasiswi berusia 18 tahun, menghilang. Mary Ann Pesch, seorang pemain ski berbakat yang juga seorang mahasiswi berusia 18 tahun, menghilang. Ei Koku, seorang penari balet berusia masih 15 tahun, menghilang. Cindy Shell, seorang mahasiswi berusia 18 tahun, menghilang. Rosalind Thorpe, seorang mahasiswi berusia 23 tahun, menghilang. Alison Liu, seorang mahasiswi berusia 21 tahun, menghilang. Saat ini polisi begitu kebingungan. Mereka menyimpulkan bahwa para wanita muda itu berada di pinggir jalan untuk menumpang ke mobil seseorang yang melintas. Karena pada saat ini, menumpang mobil dengan menghentikannya di jalan raya adalah hal yang biasa bagi para mahasiswi. Dan sebagian mengira bahwa mungkin ada kaitannya dengan obat terlarang yang memang sedang sering terjadi akhir-akhir ini, serta kehidupan bebas kaum hippie.
Confusing time for homicide investigators.
Pada bulan April, kepolisian melakukan penyelidikan rutin senjata api. Tetapi kemudian, detektif menemukan sesuatu yang janggal yang akan mempertemukannya dengan seorang pria muda, bertubuh tinggi dan besar, yang dikenal sebagai raksasa yang lembut. Ia adalah pria yang sangat populer di kalangan petugas polisi setempat. Dalam penyelidikan tersebut, detektif menemukan catatan penjualan senjata dari dealer yang tercantum nama seseorang yang mencoba membeli senjata dan catatannya dihapus. Tetapi detektif kemudian menyelidiki catatan yang terhapus tersebut dan berhasil menemukan bahwa orang tersebut pernah terlibat dalam pembunuhan beberapa tahun lalu. Orang tersebut adalah Edmund Kemper, seorang pria berusia 24 tahun, bertumbuh tinggi 2 meter 6 cm, dengan berat 129 kg. Ia adalah orang yang biasa berkumpul bersama para petugas polisi di sebuah bar bernama Jury Room, tempat biasa para petugas polisi berkumpul dan minum selepas tugas mereka.
He would come down to a local watering hole that us police officers would go to after work and hang out and talk with us. He was had a great personality. He was very friendly, very outgoing, and he was a likable guy.
Setelah diskusi panjang di antara para petugas polisi, akhirnya detektif Michael Alfie yang akan mendatangi Ed, si pria bertubuh raksasa itu di rumahnya.
The discussion became, well, who's going to go take the gun away from this guy? Because when you look at his dealer's record of sale, he's 6 feet 8.5 and 285 pounds. So he's a pretty big guy. So being the junior detective, I drew the straw.
Ed Kemper tinggal bersama ibunya di jalan pinggiran kota yang terlihat begitu tenang, di lingkungan yang nyaman. Tetapi alamat rumahnya tidak begitu jelas, sehingga detektif Michael Alfie harus mencari dengan teliti di sekitar lingkungan tersebut. Lalu ia menghampiri sebuah mobil yang terparkir di depan sebuah rumah. di mana pintu mobil tersebut terlihat terbuka dan terdapat seorang pria di dalamnya. Ketika detektif hendak menanyakan pada orang tersebut, pria itu lalu keluar dari mobilnya dan berdiri tepat di depan detektif Olivia saat itu. Detektif yakin bahwa pria ini adalah orang yang dicarinya karena tubuhnya yang begitu tinggi dan besar yang tidak biasanya. Dan ternyata benar, ia adalah Ed Kemper. Lalu detektif menyita senjata yang dibungkus handuk yang terdapat di dalam bagasi mobil Ed untuk melakukan pemeriksaan. Tetapi kepemilikan senjatanya ini tidak menjadikannya dianggap sebagai tersangka utama atas rangkaian kejadian pembunuhan yang terjadi akhir-akhir ini. Lantas detektif Michael Olivia dan rekannya pergi tanpa ada sedikit pun kecurigaan. 2 minggu kemudian, petugas polisi Jim Conner yang sedang bertugas malam menerima telepon dari Ed Kemper, pria yang biasa mengobrol dengannya di bar jury room.
Knowing Ed, I got on the phone and we started talking. I could tell that something wasn't right. He was in Pueblo, Colorado. He was in a phone booth and he hadn't had any sleep for several days. And he said he had done something really bad. He said that he had killed his mother and a friend of hers. He said that they were at his house. And he asked me if I knew Mickey Aluffi, and I said yes. And he says, well, my house is hard to find. Mickey knows how to find it very easily because he had been out there and had confiscated a gun.
Seketika itu juga para petugas polisi segera bergegas mendatangi rumah Ed Kemper beserta detektif Michael Olivia yang mengetahui persis kediaman Ed dan segera memeriksa rumah tersebut.
Classic. We pulled back a sheet and we saw some hair and some blood.
Kejutan yang mengerikan yang diterima polisi dari Ed Kemper tidak hanya sampai di situ. Kemudian Ed Kemper kembali membuat pengakuan yang mengejutkan. Dia mengatakan pada detektif Jim Conner bahwa dia juga telah mengakhiri hidup semua mahasiswi itu.
He made comments to Jim Conner on the telephone that he had killed all of the co-eds too.
Untuk sobat semua, sebelum lanjut ada baiknya untuk mengklik terlebih dahulu tombol like, share, dan subscribe, serta tombol notifikasinya, agar tak ketinggalan update kisah nyata tak biasa dari K-Channel selanjutnya. Edmund Emil Kemper III lahir pada 18 Desember 1948 di Burbank, California, Amerika Serikat. Ia adalah anak kedua dari 3 bersaudara dan satu-satunya putra dari orang tuanya yang bernama Cornell Elizabeth Kemper dan Edmund Emil Kemper Jr. Ayahnya adalah veteran Perang Dunia II yang setelah berperang, ia menguji senjata nuklir di Pacific Proving Grounds sebelum kembali ke California. Ed sangat mengagumi ayahnya, namun mengalami kesulitan dengan ibunya.
His mother and his father were very strict disciplinarians. There was no leeway one way or the other.
She was a punitive person that he resented greatly.
She was harsh, aggressive, putting him down, I think, when he was younger, call it verbally abusive, I don't know, but very aggressive verbally.
Setelah bertahun-tahun menjalani pernikahan yang tidak bahagia, orang tua Ed akhirnya berpisah pada tahun 1957 dan resmi bercerai pada tahun 1961. Kemudian sang ibu membawa 3 anak-anaknya untuk pindah dan tinggal bersamanya di Montana. Ed memiliki hubungan yang sangat dekat dengan ayahnya. Ia tentunya sangat terpukul ketika orang tuanya bercerai, sehingga ia harus hidup terpisah dari sang ayah yang sangat ia kagumi. Ed Campbell memiliki hubungan yang sangat tidak berfungsi dengan baik dengan ibunya yang seorang pencandu alkohol dan sering memaki, mengecam dan mengejek Ed sebagai orang aneh sejati karena tubuh Ed yang tumbuh lebih tinggi, lebih kuat dan terlihat lebih aneh di antara orang-orang pada umumnya.
I was 7.5, 8 years old. My parents divorced. My mother's working to raise 3 kids. We lived in a house where there was a basement, and at a certain time of the evening, my sisters would go up to bed upstairs, where I used to go to bed upstairs. I had to go down to the basement. I walked into complete darkness with these pipes wheezing and banging over my head. You know, the rattles, the weird sounds in the night that can be spooky to a kid. And I've got this horrible terror going on inside of me. My imagination was vivid.
His mother put him in the basement room and would lock him in at night because she had this idea that he could possibly sexually assault his sisters.
He described it as having a cot and a sleeping bag and a light hanging down from the ceiling with just a bare bulb and a string. Talked about it as being a very difficult time in his life, very scary. You could hear rats running around at night, that kind of thing.
Pada saat ini, Ed mulai bertingkah aneh. Ia menunjukkan perilaku antisosial, melakukan kekejaman terhadap hewan, dan memiliki imajinasi gelap yang mengerikan.
I had an upbringing that was some have called dysfunctional. The whole home life, I watched it deteriorate. I was about 8 or 9 years old. I went to a magic show.
There was a traveling show where they had the guillotine act, where they took a young girl out of the audience, they put her head in the guillotine, they made it look like they chopped it off, and everybody was horrified, and Ed was thrilled.
Right at that moment, I departed reality because logically, I should have been able to ascertain that that could not happen. You're not going to get away with chopping somebody's head off. But the concept of it was so raw and it was titillating. I says, wow. And that got caught up in my morbid fascination.
He had issues with wanting to dominate and control people. And in his mind, taking the head off and possessing it was his idea of ultimate control over women.
It was in that darkness that he begins to really formulate the fantasy of ultimately killing.
Pada usia 10 tahun, ia mengubur hidup-hidup kucing peliharaannya, kemudian digali kembali untuk dimainkannya. Lalu ia kembali membunuh kucing lainnya, hanya karena ia merasa kucing itu lebih menyukai adik perempuannya, Ellen Lee Camper, daripada dirinya. Lalu, ia menyimpan beberapa bagian bangkainya di lemari sampai ibunya menemukannya.
There's many serial sexual murderers that have a background of killing cats, torturing cats, tormenting cats. Why cats? Because cats are a female symbol.
Ed juga mematahkan kepala dan tangan boneka milik kakak perempuannya, Susan Camper, saat sang kakak menggodanya untuk menantang mencium gurunya.
He showed a lot of pathology as a child. He would cut off the heads of his sister's dolls, in other ways deform the dolls.
At 10, he had made a comment that if he ever had to kiss his teacher, he would have to kill her. And when you think about a 9 and 10-year-old at that point having that kind of a thought process, you begin to wonder, what is it about him?
Pada usia 14 tahun, Ed kabur dari rumah. Ia meninggalkan ibunya untuk mencari ayahnya.
When I was 14 years old, I ran away from my mother. I wanted to be with my father, and I wanted to get away from my mother because I was dreaming, thinking, fantasizing murder all day long. I couldn't get it out of my head. I go stay with my dad, and this opened up whole new feelings in me that I'd never had before. And I wish I'd had more experience with my father growing up.
He hated his mother. He loved his dad. That would have been a dream for Edmund to have things work out, living with his father.
Sesampainya di sana, Ed mengetahui bahwa ayahnya telah menikah lagi dan memiliki anak tiri. Ed hanya tinggal sementara waktu dengan ayahnya, karena ibu tirinya merasa tidak nyaman tinggal bersama Ed yang tampak begitu aneh baginya.
Ed's stepmother was absolutely terrified of him.
Ed had this way of looking at people with kind of a weird, empty stare that unnerved her. Finally, Ed's father took Ed to his parents' 17-acre ranch in California, ostensibly to go for a visit over a Christmas vacation. But when Ed's father went to leave, he told Ed, "No, you're staying."
We went up to the mountains to stay for Christmas, and I got left behind.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back. He was mad at everybody in his inner circle that rejected him.
He had hoped to go and live with his father, and he described to me that when he went there, he was rejected by his father.
Lalu sang ayah mengirim Ed untuk tinggal bersama kakek neneknya dari pihak sang ayah yang tinggal di sebuah peternakan terpencil di kaki bukit Sierra Nevada, sekitar 2 mil sebelah barat kota Norfolk. Ed Kemper kini berusia 15 tahun. Saat ini ia sedang berada di dapur berdua dengan neneknya, Maudie Matilda Kemper, ketika sang kakek sedang pergi berbelanja. Lalu Ed terlibat pertengkaran dengan neneknya.
His grandmother was a dominating figure like his mother was, and he began to build resentment toward her because she didn't really trust him. He didn't like being told what to do over and over and over.
My grandmother had made agreements with me from the gate that she wouldn't get into little humiliating mind games with me like my mother had done. Well, very soon after that, the mind game stuff started up. Started developing the fantasies toward her, killing her. Possessing the severed heads of women.
Kemudian ia mengambil sedapan yang diberikan kakeknya untuk berburu dan melakukan hal yang tak terduga yang dilakukan seorang remaja terhadap neneknya sendiri yang berusia 66 tahun.
He found his grandmother to be an authoritarian and a disciplinarian like his mother.
His grandfather was out shopping or whatever, and he took a .22 and shot and killed his grandmother.
I was really aware of the evil I was capable of. You know, the murderous.
And something snaps in his head. He turned a gun on her, and he shoots in the head.
He then shot her twice more, dragged her body into the bedroom, and He needed to be sure she was dead, so he stabbed her.
He had such rage, he said that if the knife wouldn't have broke under the clavicle of his grandmother, he would have never stopped stabbing.
Dan demi mencegah penderitaan yang akan dialami sang kakek saat mengetahui neneknya telah tiada akibat senapan yang telah ditembakkannya, lalu Ed kembali melakukan hal yang sama pada kakeknya yang berusia 72 tahun saat sang kakek baru saja tiba dan keluar dari mobilnya.
When he realized his grandfather would be coming home and finding his wife dead, they were elderly. He decided he couldn't allow his grandfather to go through that trauma. So when his grandfather came in, he shot and killed him.
He said he didn't want the grandfather to suffer knowing that his wife was dead. It's the most bizarre statement. I mean, you don't go out and just shoot somebody to keep them from finding out that their wife is dead.
Basically, you're dealing with a young male that is engaged in fantasies that are aberrant and destructive and violent before adolescent. You're looking at an individual that has a broken home, a cold and distant mother, a absent father through divorce or just abandonment. They get into animal torturing. There are patterns that are identifiable.
Ed lalu menelpon ibunya untuk menyuruhnya menghubungi polisi setempat, dan polisi segera tiba dan menahan Ed Kemper. Psikiater pengadilan mendiagnosisnya bahwa Ed memiliki penyakit mental, skizofrenia paranoid. Ed lalu dikirim ke Rumah Sakit Negara Bagian Atascadero, sebuah fasilitas keamanan maksimum di San Luis Obispo County yang menampung narapidana dengan gangguan mental.
In those days, we had 1,600 patients in the hospital. There were probably several dozen people who had committed murder. 800 mentally disordered sex offenders. We had psychology staff of only 10 people or so. That was a very harmful place for him to be institutionalized. He certainly learned a lot of bad things.
Psikiater dan pekerja sosial menyatakan bahwa Ed Kemper tidak menunjukkan kegilaan ide, tidak ada gangguan pikiran, tidak ada ekspresi delusi atau halusinasi. Mereka mengamati bahwa Ed Kemper adalah orang yang cerdas dan introspektif. Bahkan hasil tes IQ yang diberikan, Ed Kemper memiliki hasil di atas rata-rata, yaitu IQ 145.
Ed is a bright fellow, and that was obvious when you were talking with him. He was kind of a model patient.
Ed Kemper menjadi orang yang disenangi oleh para psikiaternya dan menjadi seorang narapidana teladan. Lalu ia dilatih untuk memberikan tes psikiatris kepada narapidana lain. Di sisi lain, tanpa mereka ketahui, kehidupan fantasi Ed Kemper terus berkembang.
Generally, what you'll find is that the child will pursue these violent fantasies, and in adolescence, the sexual element will come on board, and they will have sexual fantasies that develop along the lines of using people as an object rather than a partner. They want to do something to somebody, not with somebody.
He had a fantasy life. He described himself as masturbating numerous times during a day when he was in the mental hospital. Remember, he was 15 when he went into the mental hospital, and he really had never had any sexual experience at all.
Setelah 5 tahun berada di rumah sakit gangguan mental narapidana, tepat pada hari ulang tahunnya ke-21 tahun, Ed Kemper dibebaskan bersyarat dari Atascadero.
Kemper was very smart. He knew what psychiatrists and psychologists wanted to hear. He knew all the criteria for different diagnoses. They treated him, and I think they thought they cured him.
Ed dipulangkan ke otoritas pemuda, yakni Divisi Departemen Pemasyarakatan dan Rehabilitasi para Remaja, dengan catatan agar Ed tidak tinggal bersama ibunya. Namun sayangnya, otoritas pemuda itu tidak mengindahkan rekomendasi tersebut. Dan akhirnya, Ed tinggal bersama ibunya di Aptos, California, yang tidak jauh dari tempat ibunya bekerja sebagai asisten administratif di University of California, Santa Cruz. Ed Kemper melakukan serangkaian pekerjaan kasar sebelum mendapatkan pekerjaan di Divisi Jalan Raya Negara Bagian California. Dan selama waktu ini ia tinggal bersama ibunya, hubungan ibu dan anak ini masih tidak sehat. Mereka sering bertengkar dan sering didengar oleh tetangga mereka.
Kind of an odd man. He didn't say much. He seemed like kind of a mama's boy. I always was kind of afraid of him, actually. He scared me a lot, and I heard him and his mother argue quite a bit, all the time.
Karena tidak tahan lagi, lalu Ed pindah dan menyewa apartemen bersama temannya. Ed Kemper yang kini berusia 24 tahun, begitu sangat kesepian. Ia mendambakan dapat berkencan dengan seorang gadis, tetapi ia tidak memiliki keberanian dan tidak merasa percaya diri akan keadaan fisiknya yang berukuran tidak biasa dari pria-pria pada umumnya. Dan ia merasa tidak ada hal yang bisa ia banggakan atas dirinya.
Particularly inadequate around women, so I think he was lonely.
Here is a young man, he's 21, 22, and he probably never had a date in his life. Probably have the usual interest and needs to connect with women. What can you tell someone about yourself? That I murdered my grandparents and I was in a mental hospital for the last 5 years of my life. I can't imagine how difficult it would have had to be. That doesn't excuse anything, but it, in my mind, describes the situation.
Hal yang dia bisa lakukan hanyalah terus memupuk fantasi gelap yang dapat memuaskan hasratnya yang entah kapan bisa ia wujudkan menjadi kenyataan. Hingga akhirnya Ed tak tahan lagi dan mewujudkan fantasi gelapnya.
So he started picking up coeds, and some of them he wound up murdering and doing even worse things at times.
Setelah penangkapannya, Ed lalu membawa para detektif ke semua lokasi kejahatannya dan ia menjelaskan semua pembunuhannya dengan sangat rinci.
And he goes into great detail about the things that he did to these girls.
Most of the serial killers I've worked with fall into two distinct types. One group of serial killers will never like to talk about their offending behavior at all. Whereas the second group of serial killers are desperate to talk about their killing. They're desperate to be at the heart of the story.
He said a lot of things that they're kind of disturbing.
Ed Kemper menjemput dua mahasiswi yang berusia 18 tahun, Mary Ann Pesch dan Anita Mary Lucchesa, yang ikut menumpang mobil Ed dari Universitas Negeri Fresno menuju ke Universitas Stanford. Tetapi Ed mengubah arahnya ke daerah hutan terpencil. Dan di sanalah kemudian ia memborgol kedua gadis itu, menikam dan mencekiknya hingga tewas. Lalu kedua gadis itu diletakkan di bagasi mobil Ford Galaxy-nya dan membawanya ke apartemen yang ia sewa saat temannya sedang pergi. Sebelum memotong-motong mayatnya, Ed memotret dan melakukan hubungan intim dengan mayat-mayat tersebut. Lalu memasukkan potongan-potongan mayat tersebut ke kantong plastik dan membuangnya di daerah Gunung Loma Prieta. yang kemudian pada bulan Agustus 1972, polisi menemukan tengkorak korban, tetapi tidak dapat menemukan sisa-sisa jasad ataupun jejak dari kedua korban tersebut. Pada suatu malam, Ed menjemput seorang gadis berusia 15 tahun, Eiko Ku, yang menumpang ke mobilnya untuk minta tolong diantarkan ke kelas tari setelah ia ketinggalan bis. Namun kemudian, Ed mengendarai mobilnya menuju ke daerah terpencil, lalu menodongkan pistol ke arah Eiko dan melakukan hal yang sama seperti pada dua korban sebelumnya. Ed kini kembali tinggal bersama ibunya setelah Ed merasa lelah selalu didatangi oleh ibunya secara tiba-tiba ke apartemennya dan selalu dihubungi ibunya hampir setiap hari. Dan pada hari itu, Ed sedang berkendara di sekitar kampus Gabriel College. Lalu ia menjemput mahasiswi berusia 18 tahun, Cindy Shell, yang ikut menumpang ke mobil Ed. Namun lagi-lagi, Ed membawanya ke daerah hutan dan menembaknya hingga tewas dengan pistol kaliber 22. Jasadnya kemudian ia bawa ke rumah ibunya, disimpan dalam lemari. Namun keesokan harinya, setelah ibunya pergi bekerja, Ed mulai meluapkan nafsu liarnya pada jasad tersebut, lalu memotong-motongnya dan memenggalnya dengan gergaji listrik di bak mandi ibunya. Tetapi kali ini, Ed tidak membuang semua potongan jasadnya ke tebing. Tetapi ia menyimpan penggalan kepalanya dan setiap hari secara teratur, ia melanjutkan melampiaskan nafsu liarnya dengan memasukkannya pada mulut kepala Cindy Shell yang terpenggal. Setelah beberapa hari ia merasa terpuaskan, lalu kepala Cindy ia kuburkan di halaman yang dekat dengan jendela kamarnya.
He had dismembered her, but in his mind there was some relationship there. He had an attachment, and he kept her head.
With most of them, he would actually have intercourse with the dead woman. He would have sex with her entire body, then sometimes also with the decapitated body. And then sometimes he would have oral sex with the decapitated head.
It's not unusual for a serial murderer to have sexual actions with a decapitated body. It's because it's not a person to them. To them, it's an object.
I have the power to do anything I want with this woman. She's mine, and I can do anything that I'm curious about, do anything I've only dreamed about doing, and nobody can do anything about it. Power is a big part of it, but extreme sexual pathology is another.
Setelah pertengkaran sengit dengan ibunya, Kemper segera pergi dan mencari korban berikutnya. Dan pada hari itu, Ed menjemput tumpangan seorang mahasiswi berusia 23 tahun, Rosalind Heatherthorpe, yang duduk di kursi depan di sampingnya. Lalu beberapa saat kemudian, seorang mahasiswi bertubuh kecil bernama Alison Liu meminta tumpangan mobil pada Ed, dan Liu duduk di kursi belakang mobil Ed. Kini, Ed memiliki dua calon korban. Kemudian ia memperlambat laju kendaraannya dan melepaskan peluru ke kepala Rosalind Heatherthorpe dan selanjutnya ke arah Alison Liu. Ed kembali membawa dua jasad korbannya tanpa kepala ke rumah ibunya, karena sebelumnya Ed telah memenggalnya di dalam mobil. Lantas ia kembali melampiaskan nafsu liarnya dengan kedua mayat tanpa kepala tersebut. Dan keesokan harinya, ia segera membuang kedua jasadnya yang telah dipotong-potong dan telah dikeluarkan pelurunya untuk mencegah identifikasi. Seminggu kemudian, Potongan-potongan jasad tersebut ditemukan di Eden Canyon dan sebagian besar ditemukan di dekat Route 1.
And this apparently was the grisly pattern set in the death of the girl whose body parts were found scattered from here in Santa Cruz, and an even more horrible possibility has come to light with the findings of the two girls in Castro Valley. All the blood was pumped from their bodies, indicating that they may have been butchered while they were still alive. Peter Burns, Eyewitness News, Santa Cruz.
Di saat polisi sedang kebingungan dan berusaha untuk menangkap si pelaku, sementara Ed Kemper, dia sedang duduk santai di tengah para petugas polisi di bar favorit mereka.
I remember Ed being there on many occasions, especially during the time of the homicides that were going on. He would come in and have a few beers with the guys. He was a likable guy.
While he was with them, he was able to think about, here I am, an ongoing murderer, and they don't know anything about it, and they fully accept me, and I'm one of the boys. He was a police groupie, actually, is the best way of describing it.
Many serial sexual murderers have a fascination with police. That's part of their psychology. And they do that for a number of different reasons. To hang out with them was one, but they also sometimes can follow the investigation and see if they're talking about it at all. This is very stimulating for them.
Ed kini mulai khawatir bahwa ibunya akan mengetahui apa yang telah ia lakukan selama ini. Akhirnya, ia memutuskan untuk melakukan kejahatan yang dia impikan sejak ia masih kecil. Kejahatan terkeji yang tidak seorang pun mampu membayangkannya, yang dilakukan pada ibu kandungnya sendiri.
Got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, took a hammer, went into his mother's bedroom, just jammed that hammer through her head several times. That was a very messy murder.
He cut off her head, and then he inserted his penis into her mouth.
Put it on the mantle above the fireplace, and just yelled and screamed at it. And at times he threw darts at her face. He talked about all the time she had screamed at him and yelled at him or belittled him.
He cut out her vocal cords and tried to destroy them in the garbage disposal unit at the sink because it was her chastising him using those vocal cords that so bothered.
Karena khawatir kematian ibunya akan segera diketahui oleh sahabat ibunya, Sally, yang berusia 59 tahun. Lalu Ed mengundang Sally untuk datang ke rumah untuk makan malam. Namun, nasib malang menimpa Sally. Saat ia datang, Ed segera mengakhiri hidupnya dan menyembunyikannya di dalam lemari. Kemudian ia melarikan diri dari tempat kejadian. Ed menyetir mobilnya tanpa henti ke Pueblo, Colorado, sambil meminum pil kafein agar tetap terjaga selama perjalanan sejauh 1.600 km. Setelah mengemudi selama 3 hari tanpa istirahat, akhirnya dia menelpon polisi dan menyerahkan diri. Dan detektif Medina adalah salah satu detektif yang diutus ke rumah sang ibu untuk olah TKP.
Was nothing disturbed. It looked like somebody had just left on vacation. We flipped over the mattress, and of course it was soaked with blood. And there was a note there. He left a note that said, "Sorry, gents, for the mess, but really had no time." That's the first time in my career, and I've been in this business 43 years, that You know, the suspect left the cops a note.
An investigation is underway to see to what extent Kemper is related to those killings. He was extremely affable, cooperative, and articulate and intelligent.
Edmund Kemper diadili atas 8 tuduhan pembunuhan tingkat pertama. Baik pihak penuntut maupun pihak pembela sama-sama mencari jawaban atas pertanyaan yang ada dalam benak setiap orang. Mengapa ia harus mengakhiri hidup orang-orang ini dengan begitu keji? Penyelidik pembela Harold Cartwright menghabiskan 100 jam untuk mewawancarai Ed Kemper.
I never at all felt threatened at any time by, 260 pounds or something, 6'8" or whatever. And he's an enormous man, but he was just sort of like a gentle giant.
He only once said something like, it was the way I could control them. And that's the only thing he ever said the entire time I dealt with him that had anything to do with why he did what he did.
He apparently, according to what he says, fantasized about doing this for quite a long period of time. And he states that he never would have been able to have acted out any of this fantasy if it were not for the fact that there were so many attractive, naive girls hitchhiking in the Bay Area and in this county.
It was unbelievable because Ed seemed like, excuse the phrase, a gentle giant, with a very nice personality and likable kind of guy. That he could be responsible for something like that.
He was too quiet sometimes, and he was always taking things, back and forth. Guns. He had guns that I saw. I guess that's why I thought he was strange. They scared me.
Unnoticed.
He was an average person. He blended in with everybody. I mean, he talked a lot. When we had a barbecue down here in the backyard last July. So.
How do you feel now that you found out he was a neighbor?
Scared still. Because he really was a neighbor. I lived right next door in the next apartment next to him.
Dan pada tanggal 1 November 1973, di ruang sidang, rekaman pengakuan Ed Kemper diputar dengan keras. Ed mengatakan bahwa ia mengakhiri para korbannya karena ia menginginkan mereka untuk dirinya sendiri, seperti harta benda. Kasus Ed Kemper begitu menggemparkan dunia, sehingga sejak penangkapannya, Ed banyak melakukan wawancara di berbagai media, termasuk untuk film-film dokumenter tentang kehidupan dan kejahatannya. Dia juga menjadi subjek dari banyak buku-buku, film, miniseri televisi, dan bahkan lagu. Setelah 12 juri berunding selama 5 jam, akhirnya Edmund Kemper dinyatakan bersalah atas 8 tuduhan pembunuhan tingkat pertama dan ia dijatuhi hukuman seumur hidup. Lalu, apa yang sebenarnya mendorong Ed Kemper menghilangkan nyawa 10 korban tak berdosa? Apakah karena kehidupan keluarganya yang hancur, serta dugaan pelecehan secara emosional dari ibunya?
I think when we're all studying serial murderers, we want to find something to blame. It's got to be this crazy mother that he had who locked him in the cellar, but she must have felt something. People who are around serial killers for a period of time will pick up some type of a feeling. They can't describe it, but they know something.
There are genetic and biological factors, there are sociological factors, and there are complex psychological factors, all of which interact. And if we're going to ever reduce and prevent these things, we have to attack it on all these levels.
I don't think anybody is born to kill. I think everybody is born with a series of pluses and minuses in their makeup. both physically and mentally and emotionally. I think that things happen to people. Most people are able to cope with it, deal with it. Some people are not.
Ed Kemper is the classic sociopath.
He feels no guilt. It's all about him. No compassion whatsoever.
It's very difficult to say how he looked at what he was doing. Would a person who walked into a butcher have remorse about cutting up a chicken? I don't know. I doubt it. And I think that's what he looked at. An object that he could dismember.
I had a real bad problem depriving people of their lives. It wasn't the aspect of killing them, it was the aspect of possessing their bodies afterwards. So it was almost after an effect, evicting someone from their human body.
I think there is a side of him that would have given anything to be a normal person. I could see that in him. I could see it while he was testifying. There's a part of Ed Kemper that is as horrified and as disgusted with what he did as the rest of us are.
I'm sure that there's no part of him that is happy with what he wound up doing.
Edmund Kemper menjalani hukuman penjaranya di penjara negara bagian fasilitas medis California di Fayetteville, di utara San Francisco. Mengingat kepribadian Ed Kemper yang tampaknya menyenangkan, Ed dianggap sebagai tahanan teladan. Ia bahkan ditunjuk menjadi koordinator sebuah proyek bernama The Blind Project, sebuah proyek nirlaba untuk membantu narapidana tunanetra. Ed menyuarakan lebih dari 5.000 jam narasi untuk proyek tersebut, sehingga menghasilkan ratusan buku audio. Sebagai seorang pembunuh berantai dengan tingkat kecerdasan di atas rata-rata, Ed juga pernah bekerja secara ekstensif dengan FBI untuk membantu FBI dalam memahami dan mengidentifikasi para pembunuh berantai di penjara, sehingga agen FBI mampu mengidentifikasi beberapa karakteristik umum dan latar belakang pembunuh berantai yang belum diketahui saat itu. Setelah beberapa kali Ed Kemper ditolak atas pengajuan pembebasan bersyaratnya, pada sidang tahun 1988, Ed Kemper kembali ditolak. Ia mengatakan bahwa masyarakat tidak siap dalam bentuk apapun untuknya, dan ia tidak bisa menyalahkan mereka atas hal tersebut. Sementara menurut jaksa penuntut, tidak peduli seberapa besar Ed Kemper menjadi tahanan teladan, karena kejahatan yang dilakukannya begitu besar. Jadwal pengajuan pembebasan bersyarat Ed Kemper berikutnya yang memenuhi syarat adalah pada tahun 2024, yang pada saat itu ia akan berusia 76 tahun. Saat Ed Kemper berusia 42 tahun, dalam masa hukumannya, Ed menderita stroke. Hal ini mengakhiri upaya sukarelawannya dalam Blind Project. Ia berada di kursi roda, dan pada tahun 2019, kondisi kesehatannya semakin memburuk karena ia juga menderita diabetes, penyakit jantung, dan penyakit lainnya. Pada hari Selasa, 9 Juli 2024, dalam sidang pengajuan pembebasan bersyarat Ed Kemper yang tidak ia hadiri, Ed kembali ditolak. Dan itu merupakan ke-12 kalinya ia ditolak dalam pembebasan bersyaratnya yang memenuhi syarat. Jaksa wilayah Santa Cruz, Jeff Russell, bersaksi bahwa Ed Kemper masih berbahaya. Ia tetap berisiko tinggi. Bagaimana menurut Sobat K semua? Silahkan berbagi pendapatnya dengan sikap bijak ke dalam kolom komentar. Dan berikut sejumlah referensi dalam kisah nyata K Channel kali ini. Serta nantikan dokumenter kisah nyata lainnya yang berbeda hanya di YouTube K Channel, membuka jendela dunia.